I want you to imagine a machine. And this machine is a massive machine. It stands 363 feet tall. This machine weighs over 6.5 million pounds. It's got over 3 million parts. It generates so much energy that it cranks out 160 million horsepower. And what does that equal, basically? It equals 85 Hoover dams, and the amount of power those create. In fact, at full speed, when it hits top speed, it's traveling and booking over 6,000 miles per hour, which is, in essence, greater than Mach 8, 8 times the speed of sound. If you take all of the fuel in this machine and stuff it in a car that gets 30 miles to the gallon, you can drive over 20 million miles with it. That is 800 times around the Earth. I'm talking about this, the Saturn V. This, to me, is probably the greatest, if not the most awesome machine ever built by human beings. And why am I showing you this machine? I'm showing this machine to you for 2 reasons. One, this year, we're celebrating what happens to be the 50th anniversary of the first Apollo moon landing, the first time human beings walked on another heavenly body. That's one reason why I'm showing it to you. The other reason I'm showing it to you is because I have come to the conclusion in my life that anything extraordinary, any extraordinary achievements, anything game-changing awesome, seldom, and I mean seldom, ever happens by playing it safe. Ever. You know, I was a college professor, and I taught at a couple different universities for about 25 years. And I taught the same thing that most every other business professor teaches, and has been for decades. It's in most every business textbook out there. And it's basically the concept of a SMART goal. Have you ever heard of a SMART goal? A SMART goal is an acronym. And the word SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. And what that basically means is that if a goal is SMART, it's a good goal. But I've come to the conclusion that a SMART goal is just not going to work. And it's not going to work because of a speech I've heard. I've heard this speech a ton of times in my life, a ton. But for whatever reason, one particular day, I heard this speech and something clicked. Here's part of the speech I heard.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
He said, we choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. And it was that word hard that stuck out with me. It kind of just grinded at me for a while, and I wasn't sure why. You have to understand that when he made this speech, right about the time he made this speech, our sum total of manned spaceflight experience in this country was a 15-minute pop shot to space by Alan Shepard. Straight up, straight down. That was it. That was our entire experience with space travel. We didn't have what many estimate to be over 80% of the technology to do it, to go to the moon. We had to invent it all. There was not a lot of funding available. It was going to require a massive amount of funding. In fact, ultimately it required over 5% of our federal budget to do this. And the support wasn't there. Gallup studies and Gallup surveys, you've heard of Gallup polls, during this time period were overwhelmingly more so against it than they were for it. In fact, Kennedy's own advisors, his own people said, this is dumb, this is political suicide, do not do this, we have other problems to deal with in the world. But he chose to do it anyway. He chose to press forward. I want you to know, when you decide to do something that's extraordinary, There's going to be pushback from all kinds of direction. And there was definitely pushback with him in this. I want to demonstrate to you how difficult this was. When he said we're going to do this, I want to show you visually how hard this is going to be. So the first thing I want to do is I want to show you a couple things. And these are about proportionally correct as far as each other go. This is the Earth. This is a tennis ball. But in this case, it's the moon. Okay? And these are about proportionally how they are together. By show of hands, as I start spreading apart the two from each other, I want you to tell me how far you think they are apart from one another, okay? Based on proportion. Ready? Raise your hand when you think we're there. Okay? Raise them high so I can see them. Okay. I need some help. Al, will you stand up? Ladies and gentlemen, this is Al Warden, who flew the moon to Apollo 15. Let's give him a round of applause. Al, stand right there. All right, this is proportionally about how far apart these two things were. And what NASA had to do was not just make this trip. Imagine this dart. This dart is the Apollo spacecraft. NASA had to throw this dart at that moon. So I'm going to try this. No, I'm just teasing. And it wasn't just they had to throw it at that tennis ball. They didn't want to hit the tennis ball, because if you hit the tennis ball, it means you're crashing into it. They didn't want to miss the tennis ball by too far, because it meant they were just blown out into the open space. They wanted to just graze the fuzz on that tennis ball so I could get into orbit. And it wasn't even that straightforward. The moon is in constant relationship with the Earth. It's always orbiting the Earth. So they had to kind of shoot this way, knowing that by the time they got to where the moon was going to be, because the moon is moving, then they would hit it. A lot of math. You can see how difficult this was. And prior to doing this, this is about how far they've gotten. Right here, 1 inch. That's the farthest we've traveled in space when Kennedy said, we're going to do this. Thank you, Al. Give Al Warden a round of applause, please. This was going to be extraordinary. This was going to require a completely different goal paradigm to pull this off, and not one that was acceptable by the business community or by college professors. To allow you to do something different, you had to think in terms of hard. It's the word I pulled from Kennedy's speech. And what does hard mean? What does this mean? First, it means a goal is honest. It is at your core. How many of you have ever tried to lose weight? Be honest. I've tried to lose weight. We all, I think, have tried to lose weight at some point or other. How many of you failed at trying to lose weight? Okay, same hands went up. Why? Because that goal was not honest. It was not at your core. Things that are at your core and honest happen. You know, typically, something that's honest is the difference between wanting and actually doing. Two entirely different concepts. We always want to do stuff, but then actually doing it is something entirely different. This was an honest goal. And if you want to achieve something that's extraordinary, it's got to be honest. This was at Kennedy's core. Now, granted, it was a political goal for him. Honestly, I don't believe Kennedy wanted to go to the moon at all. I think it was just his way of beating the Russians at the time, the Soviets, which is, we were in the middle of the Cold War. This is all political for him. But then within NASA, it became an honest goal. I've talked to many of the astronauts and many mission control people over the years, during this time period, Al being one of them. And I am fully 100% convinced that this was at every one of their core too. Because once they got in and drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, they were all in. And they were willing to do whatever it took to make this happen. Under any circumstance. That is an honest goal. If you want to lose weight and you're honest about it, it's an honest goal, then you have to change your behavior patterns. You have to eat less. You have to eat better. You have to exercise. You can't keep doing what you've been doing and expect to do it. You have to change everything, your whole process and procedure. If you want to get out of debt, you can't keep spending money the way you've been spending it. You must change your entire behavior patterns. This was going to require all new behavior, many of which have not been designed yet or created yet. They had to be changed. They had to be created. A goal has to be actionable. In other words, you have to be willing to start right this second. If a goal is hard, you're doing it now. You're not going to wait for something else to occur. If you're wanting to say, go back to the weight loss, if you want to lose weight, and you're going to do it as soon as that new diet pill comes out, or as soon as that new zero-calorie Twinkie is manufactured, or that zero-calorie Hot Pocket, or whatever it is, as soon as that comes out, then I will start losing weight. Whatever you're waiting on, if you're waiting on something to happen, it's not going to happen ever. When Kennedy pulled the trigger on this, it started. Parts of it were already started, but this particular part started. They didn't wait for the technology to catch up, because they have to invent it all, so we'll wait a while longer for it to catch up. They didn't wait. They didn't wait for the funding to become available. They forced the issue and got the funding to make it available. They didn't wait for public sentiment to change. This is the go big or go home aspect of this. A hard goal is radical. Basically, to do something that's extraordinary requires extraordinary measures. Playing it safe, playing it smart and achievable, it's not going to work any longer. I want to kind of build on this a little bit. I want you to understand how radical this was. At the time we did this, if you look at the time we did this, at the peak of this program, there were over 400,000 people involved in this program. If you look at the 1969 employment census numbers in this country, 1 in every 150 people in this country were in some way part of this, of the workforce. That is how massive this was, how incredibly over the top it was. They had to conduct an incredible amount of imagineering and creativity to make this happen, because they had to invent everything. They had no idea how to do this. Nobody did. But let me tell you how the impact this had on our country. And this is the part that people do not understand about something great and extraordinary. When you are pushing the barriers, when you are pushing the limits of what's possible, other things happen indirectly that weren't planned. By forcing the whole goal of going to the moon by the end of the decade and having to create all this stuff, there were tons of products, goods and services that we all take for granted today, thousands of them that were spun off from all the research that was done in a short period of time. And I know you guys don't realize this or know this, but it had a huge economic impact. A lot of economists out there say that it actually had a return on investment, meaning for every $1 that the government spent on this program, they got back as high as $15 back. That's because of the thousands of products and the other industries that were created as a result of it. Things like the microwave oven you put that Hot Pocket in this morning before you came to class. Okay, that technology came out of Apollo. The water purification system in your bottled water came out of Apollo, reverse osmosis. If you're in healthcare, kidney dialysis came out of Apollo. CAT scan machines, MRI machines came out of Apollo. Intel was spun off out of Apollo. Can you imagine our country today without Intel and all the chips it generates and cranks out for our smartphones and everything else? And the list goes on, thousands of them. It had a huge economic impact in this country that nobody has a clue about. But that's what happens when you are being radical, when you are pushing the bar a big direction another way. Because when you're pushing that bar, you're creating something that's new and exciting and different, you cannot help but create other opportunities for people. You cannot help but open doors that were never even conceived of being open before. And the most amazing thing about this to me is that this was all being done with the power of the human mind. The internet did not exist during this time. Pocket calculators, little calculators did not exist at this time. Digital calculators did not exist. PCs didn't exist. They all had to use their minds. They used these slide rules, these little mechanical analog calculators, I call them, they're just like plastic things that slid and you did your math on a slide rule. And they used their brain and pencils and paper. It's amazing. And the computers they did have were massive. Computers that filled rooms this size that had like no real power. Your smartphone is hundreds of thousands of times more powerful than that computer that they had. They did what they had to do to make it work, though, and they used what they had to use to make it work. It did not matter. They were being radical. They were pushing the envelope. They were going to make it happen no matter what. Radical means doing what other people are not willing to do. I want you to keep that in the back of your mind, because if you're doing a hard goal and you're being radical, you are now doing things others are just not willing to do. It's either too hard, too big of a challenge, not enough support, whatever the case might be, they're not willing to do it, but you are. And that is probably the big reason why you will be successful. I talked to people about it. I was just talking to Elle about this a little bit ago. Whenever I hear anybody say, oh, we didn't go to the moon, it's a whole thing's a big hoax, and so on and so forth, aside from the 400 reasons I give you, well, that's a false statement, totally false statement. Honestly, to me, when it comes to this, it doesn't matter. Whether we actually got there or not is irrelevant to me, because the process of doing this, the process of trying to achieve a hard goal, is how we got all the stuff we have today. This is the detail part. This is the part where you've got to have it be specific, it's got to be measurable, and it's got to be time-based. Because details matter. Most of you probably know that we lost a crew of astronauts at Apollo 1. They were doing a simple test, a routine test on the pad. They were sitting there in the capsule, all sealed in, doing some communication stuff, plugs out test, and there was a malfunction. Basically, there was a short that caused a fire that basically killed the astronauts. A simple, minor detail that could have been fixed had it not been overlooked. Details matter. And so when people say don't bother me with the details, they do matter. And I will tell you this too. When Kennedy set this goal at 8.5 years, because he said by the end of the decade it's 8.5 years, I am convinced to this day, had he said something a little more palatable to people, we'll do this by the end of the century, 38.5 years, we would have never achieved it. Because too many things would have changed. And because of that, public sentiment would have gotten worse probably over time. Politicians would have less appetite for it. And there was just one big convoluted thing that basically came together at the right time, at the right moment, that made this happen. And that 8.5-year time window was critical. And that helped push everybody faster to get it done. This program, more than anything else to me, aside from the economic benefit, aside from all the cool stuff we got out of it, and how it made our lives all better because of it, aside from all that, the most important thing to me is that this program inspired an entire generation of kids to go on and be mathematicians, scientists, engineers, computer people, whatever. It inspired my generation. I can remember, I have only a few memories of my childhood. I will never forget this. The day we landed on the moon in July 1969, I was a young kid, very young. But I do remember sitting there in my grandma's house, in front of a black and white big console television, watching it. And I remember after watching that happen, I can remember shortly thereafter going outside and looking up at the moon and thinking to myself, there are people up there. And it changed my life. And if you talk to my parents, they will tell you all kinds of bad stories about how I did things probably I shouldn't have, because I was really wanting to be an astronaut. And when they went to school, and I did things that I did because I wanted to go down this road. I did not achieve that, no. But I got a great education as a result of it. It opened up all kinds of doors for me that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And that's what pushing yourself towards a hard goal does. Whether you actually achieve it or not, the process of getting there opens up other doors, other windows for you to climb in and walk through. I want to end with this. Despite all this coolness that you're seeing what's happening today with SpaceX, Blue Origin, and Virgin Galactic, all these private entities who are doing things, despite all this, it comes nowhere near this. It doesn't. And the impact this has had on our country and all of our lives, whether you know it or not. History can teach us things. But you got to take the time to learn from history and look back at history and see what lessons you can learn from that history. Let me ask you a question. And I'm going to ask you this question. I want you to think about this as you go through the rest of your lives. I ask this question to yourself over and over again as you get older. When was the last time anything great, outstanding, game-changing, awesome happened in your life when you played it safe? And keep asking that question. Our greatest accomplishments in life are not easy. They are very difficult. They are hard. They require intense focus, tenacity, and effort. And honestly, any kind of goal that requires that kind of transformational thinking, the kind of thinking that allows you to break bad habits or change your bad behaviors or those behaviors that are entrenched into your life, isn't smart, it's hard.